영제 쳔보서도 님이 장존을 모놈 쳔보가 되다. 바거다른 엄참도 실마도 돈바트지잖아 기점서를 오늘 저런 저기 점검서 저거 뒤집션도 일라. 지금에 번조자라서란데 공개 또반보를 신기로.
The profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. In order to liberate all sentient beings, let us all give rise to the unsurpassed bodhicitta. Next, we will continue teaching the Udāna Sutra. The Udāna Sutra has 33 chapters in total. The first chapter discusses impermanence. This chapter on impermanence is very important. Because if we seriously study the teachings on impermanence, I think many people will naturally develop an awareness of impermanence in their minds. If one truly develops the view of impermanence, I believe, just as mentioned in yesterday's commentary, if we do not study impermanence, we will naturally hold the strong view of permanence. With the view of permanence comes deep self-clinging. With self-clinging, mental afflictions begin to arise gradually. After afflictions arise, we create karma. After creating karma, we suffer pain. And then we continue to cycle endlessly in samsara. There is never any possibility of liberation. Therefore, among all the chapters of this scripture, the most crucial and truly important aspect is to first expound upon impermanence. We have also studied this before, for example, in Open the Door to Mind Training, the teachings of Mount Zaga, as well as in other related teachings. The profound concept of impermanence is also explained in great depth and detail. Many great masters of the Kadampa tradition place special emphasis on the contemplation of impermanence first. In fact, the early Kadampa tradition and our Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism are very similar in many of their practice teachings. Basically, they placed great importance on retreat practice. Many of the teachings focus on mind training. Subduing one's own mind is, among all practices, given very special attention or significant emphasis. Later, when it came to the much later Kadampa tradition, which was a significant development, they began to increasingly emphasize the rigorous theoretical study and comprehensive teaching, including the in-depth study of the 5 great treatises, which are foundational texts. So as for our early translation Nyingma school, actually from a historical perspective, for a certain period of time, the main and most significant emphasis was consistently placed on dedicated practice. This was true whether it was during the influential time of Guru Padmasambhava or the omniscient Longchen Rabjam, as well as Jigme Lingpa, Patrul Rinpoche, and Mifam Rinpoche in many of their profound and sacred teachings. They placed great importance on the methods of mind training. This is something that can clearly be seen from the works they left behind. Starting from Mifam Rinpoche, there has been a detailed analysis of the 5 great treatises, and there is also work in this area, although it was not stated that one must study the 5 great treatises. Then, as for His Holiness, Jigme Phuntsok, he also, based on the current situation in many monasteries and the philosophy of Buddhist institutes, here we also place special emphasis on the 5 great treatises. Of course, from the perspective of the Sutrayana, the 5 great treatises are also extremely important. Each of these treatises, in terms of the teachings of the Dharma, each offers a truly different and profound understanding and plays a very significant and crucial role. But most importantly, as Buddhists, it is absolutely crucial to lay a solid foundation with the preliminary practices. Because nowadays many people seem to request the preliminary practices or ask for teachings on impermanence, but such people are very few. Many people say they want an empowerment or seek the highest unsurpassed secret teachings. Of course, there is nothing wrong with this either. Having such an aspiration for the Dharma is also very good. But the key is to look at our own minds and see whether we can keep up with the teachings. If we cannot keep up, then no matter how advanced the Dharma is, our own mind stream will not be able to connect with the teachings. This is something that we absolutely must thoroughly analyze. Today, we will also continue our discussion regarding the chapter on impermanence. Because for the chapter on impermanence, I would like to explain it in a bit more detail and more broadly. So, in each and every class, we may not be able to cover many verses. Later on, there may also not be many stories or anecdotes. Moreover, if we were to elaborate further on this particular point, there actually isn't that much content. So it's also possible to cover a bit more in a single day. Now, continuing directly from yesterday's further and detailed explanation of the profound sacred teachings, bones as grey as doves, scattered everywhere after being carelessly discarded in all directions and places. Seeing this grim sight, what joy could possibly arise? The literal meaning here is, the bones left after a person dies are called remains, or skeletal remains. The bones of living people are simply called bones. So these human remains, the old bones left behind after death, are greyish-white in colour, closely resembling the colour of a gentle dove. Dove grey isn't completely white. It's slightly a bit of an unattractive, somewhat bluish-white colour. It looks rather and quite, when we look at human bones after death, or the bones of other animals too, after some time has passed, the overall dull colour of these old bones doesn't look very appealing at all, because a dove's colour is also not completely white. It has that kind of bone colour. So these human bones, in the end, after a person tragically dies, are simply discarded and cast aside. After being discarded, they then scatter all around, spreading into various different places and diverse locations. For example, in a typical charnel ground, the complete human skeleton, which was originally assembled together, eventually starts to scatter slowly in all different directions. When alive, bones and flesh are joined. After death, each part is dispersed. Isn't this also mentioned in the Bodhikāryavatara? When a person is alive, bones and flesh are all connected. After death, each part is scattered. This is the kind of situation it is. So each individual part ends up in completely different places. So after carefully seeing this particular scene, what exactly is there to be truly happy about in this moment? That's the literal meaning of this particular phrase. As for the story behind this, it takes us back to ancient times, specifically to the city of Shravasti. During those days, there were some newly ordained monks who had recently arrived. These monks would, as part of their daily routine, often go to bathe, and then change into some brand new clothes, paying particular and careful attention to their overall appearance. It was as if, as devout monks, they ought to live a simple and modest life, but they would dress up in their finest attire every day, constantly and meticulously adorning their bodies with intricate and beautiful embellishments and adornments, not reciting scriptures, not practicing diligently, not studying contemplating teachings. They spent their days like this, passing the time. Originally, they had completely shaved their heads and donned the Buddha's sacred robes to become devoted monks, but some of the young, inexperienced monks would still constantly think about beautifying their physical bodies every single day, and did not truly and earnestly study and contemplate the teachings. So, in order to help these monks develop a sense of renunciation towards samsara, the Buddha took them to the charnel ground, and after arriving at the charnel ground, at that very moment, they observed 500 thieves who were about to be executed. After the execution, their bodies were thrown into the charnel ground. After they had been dead for some time, their skeletal remains were scattered all over the entire place. Then the Buddha thoughtfully told these monks, "You are so attached to your own bodies, but take a look at yourselves. Is there anything your bodies worth being attached to? Look at these skeletons." Afterwards, many of the monks, upon witnessing this truly remarkable scene unfold before them, developed a sense of renunciation towards samsara, and then also attained realization. This is just one version of the story. There is also another account which says there were 500 monks. Arrogance began to arise in their mental continuum. In order to completely destroy the arrogance in their minds, the Buddha took them to the charnel ground. Then he subsequently gave them detailed instructions. In the end, they too attained realization. There is also such a particular version, so regardless of which specific version, in fact, whether we are monastics or lay people, of course, for lay people, protecting and maintaining their bodies is nothing wrong. But if we overly adorn or beautify ourselves, it shows that in the continuum of such people's minds, there is no contemplation of impermanence. because they are especially concerned about it. Nowadays, people in big cities basically spend all their time on this every single day, just for the act of putting on makeup. How much time do they typically spend in the morning? An hour, 2 hours even. And when removing makeup, it also takes a considerably long period of time. Every day is like this. They don't recite sutras or practice properly. If that's the case, actually, this isn't very reasonable at all. We don't dare to say anything because most people are indeed like this nowadays, and it's a common occurrence. So we can't really say that. But indeed, this kind of behavior is not very reasonable at all in any way. Also, in some other Buddhist scriptures, it is said that a devoted bhikshu went to the charnel ground, and on the long way to the charnel ground he passed through a green field. He stepped into the rice field in the fertile farmland. I'm not entirely sure. It should be somewhere in India. In the verses of our Entering the Middle Way, it says, but when Master Fazun translated it, he used my, wheat. Actually, in India, logically speaking. So, then there should indeed be both wheat and barley, correct? So when this bhikshu was crossing the field, he stepped into the farmland. Then the farmer was very unhappy and promptly stopped the bhikshu. The bhikshu said, I have an urgent matter. I truly need to go to court. He sincerely hoped the farmer would understand. Then the farmer also followed the bhikshu. He wondered what kind of lawsuit he was going to file. A bhikshu going to court, he was very curious. Then they arrived together at the charnel ground. Then he asked, what kind of lawsuit are you filing? He said, I am carefully and meticulously preparing to use these various birds and beasts as crucial witnesses. I am going to put my very own mind on trial. Because my mind is really disobedient, it thinks everything is permanent and pure. Then, after he arrived at the charnel ground, he began to use those ashen-white skeletons as the object of his contemplation and started practicing the impurity meditation. Because those beasts often fed on the corpses, perhaps they could effectively serve as something akin to notaries, utilizing them as reliable and impartial witnesses in this particular way. Following that, the farmer also genuinely felt that what he said made a lot of sense. So he meditated together with the bhikshu. Later, both of them attained realization. So when the Buddha learned about this, he also began to recite this profound and meaningful verse. This particular verse, in fact, directly refers to the previously mentioned skeletons, and its primary purpose is to powerfully counteract people's pervasive and deeply ingrained overall attachment, which often hinders spiritual progress and understanding, especially the attachment to flesh and blood. It is specifically meant to counteract 4 types of attachment. Here, as for the dove-gray color, in particular, its ashen white hue is specifically meant to counteract any deep-seated attachment to vibrant color. This is because we tend to think the living body looks inherently beautiful and appealing, but when it inevitably transforms into mere grey bones, a stark and undeniable reality, it truly feels like it is no longer clean or desirable. It seems that when it's discarded, it counteracts the attachment to enjoyment itself. We tend to think the physical body, whether it's our own or someone else's, can be truly enjoyed, that it is a kind of profound sensual pleasure. Earlier, it was about effectively counteracting attachment to physical touch. The second important point is to counteract attachment to visual color. The third crucial aspect is to counteract attachment to worldly enjoyment. The fourth, bones scattered everywhere, mainly counteracts our attachment to form, because usually when we look at the body, we tend to identify with it. We think, oh, it looks really nice. It's neither excessively fat nor overly thin, appearing very slender, remarkably dignified, and so forth. However, if all your skeletal structures were to be scattered all over the place, then there would be nothing beautiful about it. So this is to counteract such scatteredness. So through the above, after counteracting these 4 types of attachment, generally, we do not have any particular attachment to our own physical body either. There is absolutely nothing that we especially cling to or hold on to. Specifically, as I clearly perceive it, in the desolate charnel grounds of Larung, this profound verse should indeed be present. I saw this verse online, and basically the first part is the same. At the time, it was said to be from the Vinaya, right? It seems that in some Chinese versions, the beginning part, bones as pale as doves, scattered in all directions. These parts are the same. The latter part seems to go dense and piled up. It's said that this is mentioned in the Vinaya Vibhanga. It should be the one that Tenzin Rinpoche and others recite. I've only seen the Chinese version online. The Tibetan version should probably be the same. When you get the chance, take a moment to consider, if you visit the charnel grounds at Larung, this verse should be there. When we usually study the Vinaya, this is included in the Vinaya Sūtra. As a dedicated bhikshu and as a monastic practitioner, one should often go to the charnel ground and deeply contemplate the profound nature of impermanence. Actually, at the Larung charnel ground, there are a great many people who go to see it every day. But as I have personally observed before, most of them unfortunately don't have a true sense of impermanence. They just take photos, but honestly, there's nothing beautiful to photograph. If you take photos, corpses are the ugliest thing to capture. There's really nothing worth photographing. The vultures aren't worth photographing either. But honestly, sometimes we worldly people are like this. For example, when we arrive at the sacred place of Larung, in principle, with so many devoted monastics and such a truly sacred and revered place, we should certainly make a solemn vow and set forth a profound aspiration and then prostrate and pay homage. That's what we could do, but of course, for those without faith, that's another matter. Even those with faith sometimes just rush around and leave. When we arrive at the charnel ground, in principle, we see so many skeletons of once living people all around us. In the end, all of them have tragically and inevitably turned into the brittle, lifeless bones of the long dead, in this profound and somber way, through these ashen white, stark and silent bones. If we take a look, maybe within our own minds, we truly develop an awareness of impermanence. In the past, some of us especially liked to dress up our bodies and paid a lot of attention to it. If that's the case, in the end, a genuine sense of renunciation will arise in our own minds. Otherwise, sometimes nowadays, we can also see it online. Generally, lay people might use some kind of beauty app or filter. I'm not very good at it, not really sure about it. But after they take photos and use beauty filters, they post them online. For lay people, if they do this, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But if monastics do this all day long, from the perspective of us monastics, there's truly nothing very attractive about it at all. On the contrary, it just makes people think, oh, how pitiful. This particular individual definitely does not take spiritual practice seriously at all. This includes some nuns and some monks who are constantly appearing in photographs every single day, sometimes carefully covering their heads with something beautiful, showing only their eyes, exactly like that. Some young monastics even live stream very frequently online, thinking their personal homes are especially clean and nice, but it just looks like they're showing off. But in reality, a true monastic should inspire others to develop some sense of renunciation towards samsara. If you can create such a cause and condition, maybe that's very good. Occasionally, when you're in a good mood, it's fine to show a little, but if it's frequent. Nowadays, as for worldly people, many young people often do this behavior online, and as a direct result, they usually get some clicks. With this, they now have some independent income of their own and some ways to make money within this area. Everyone is aware of this situation now, but as a monastic individual, there's no need to rely on these things for your livelihood. Moreover, you might think this looks very good, but whether it's other monastics or other monastics online or lay people watching, they may not necessarily envy it, because no matter what, many of us who are ordained now are here to serve. Mainly focus on conduct of individual liberation, which is highly valued. So in Mahayana tradition, among monastic precepts and practices, as long as it benefits sentient beings, it is acceptable. This is what is commonly called a Mahayana monastic. But as for how many people can truly accept this, it's hard to say. So for a true practitioner, however, one really shouldn't treat their own physical body like non-Buddhists typically do, constantly tormenting, berating, or abandoning it. The Buddha did not permit this either. Some precepts also frequently prohibit such behavior, but as a truly modern and contemplative monastic, one should also deeply reflect upon one's own actions and their profound implications. Otherwise, no matter what, because nowadays many people, as soon as they find even the slightest fault in Buddhism, they start to exaggerate and embellish it, and take great delight in doing so. This is also a trend in public opinion. Of course, not everyone is like this, but it is indeed a trend in public opinion. There are all kinds of complex situations behind this, which many of us may not necessarily fully understand. Originally, it is simply just one single person, and that's it. For example, whether he breaks the precepts, anything he does that is not in accordance with the Dharma, this is a personal matter. It shouldn't be that for all of Buddhism, everyone has to take the blame for it. Otherwise, in our world, if just one person within a group makes a mistake and the entire organization has to bear all the blame, then just look at how many organizations across the world would be affected. Everyone is indeed very clear about this. We ourselves are also sometimes prone to developing incorrect or mistaken views, which can significantly impact our understanding and actions. Some people are very easily led to wrong views, so in this particular regard, I think it's sometimes truly worth reflecting upon this matter deeply and thoughtfully.
From a certain night, when we first entered our mother's womb as humans, our lifespan has only ever decreased, never increased. What is gone will never return. These scriptural proofs, I remember that in Longchenpa's Finding Comfort and Ease in the Nature of Mind, they are quoted extensively. At a certain time one night, from the moment we first entered our mother's womb, our lifespan has no increase at all. It only decreases, and once decreased, it will never come back. On the surface, this is very simple. Everyone knows the literal meaning of the chapter on causes and conditions. There are almost no people who cannot explain its literal meaning, but we need to understand the deeper meaning it conveys. At that time, when the Buddha was in Shravasti, he taught the principles of impermanence and change. The Buddha explained the profound truth of impermanence in this particular regard. From birth to growth and aging, and finally to death, the entire process is truly impermanent. Then a bhikshu stood up and respectfully asked the Buddha, he said, "We understand other impermanence. That is, after birth there is death, which is impermanent. But what about before birth, when still in the womb? Is that also impermanent?" He began to ask about this. When this question was asked, the Buddha both reproached him, and at the very same time, he also explained this fundamental principle. Not only after we are actually born, but the entire process is just as described below. Every stage of life is impermanent. But in fact, as soon as one enters the womb, actually, moment by moment, everything in existence is impermanent. So there is absolutely nothing that is truly permanent at all. Because we also know, on the one hand, many fetuses, even during the 9 months, some experience impermanence in between. But when we look at it, if the baby hasn't been born yet, how is its lifespan decreasing? Actually, from the moment of entering the womb, its original lifespan decreases day by day. This is a bit different from our worldly view, just a little bit. We think that if one hasn't even been born yet, how could they already be moving toward death? Only after being born can you start heading toward death. Some people might think this way, but in reality, if you analyze it carefully, it truly is impermanent, starting precisely from the very moment of entering the womb. So why is night mentioned here? The reason for mentioning night is that, generally speaking, for most people, during the day people are especially tired and busy with no time for sexual activity. Moreover, people usually have intercourse at night. So, starting from conception at night, of course, conception can also happen during the day. But here, it mainly refers to the majority of cases starting from conception. After conception, when we are in the womb, we begin to form and develop, going through stages like curdled milk, membrane, turtle shape, fish shape, and so on. All 7 stages are inherently impermanent, and there is absolutely no increase at all, truly. These years once gone never return, and there will never be any increase. So generally, in some ancient traditions, as each day passes, life also diminishes, just like a fish with little water. In our morning and evening recitations, there are also such chants. So, whether during our regular morning and evening recitations or in our own personal daily practice, this deep and abiding awareness of impermanence is always present. For example, in texts like the Words of My Perfect Teacher and how the ancient Geshes cultivated the concept of impermanence. Everyone should be very clear about this in their hearts. However, this is often only in theory. In reality, in our everyday mindset, Do we truly and consistently have such a strong and profound sense of this important concept? There was, in fact, an old and wise Khenpo among us who passed away a few years ago, Khenpo Lash. If you look at his biography, from a young age, his awareness of impermanence and renunciation was innate. Some people may have greater merit, or perhaps have developed these habits in past lives. So from childhood, they naturally develop a sense of renunciation toward the entire cycle of samsara. They are not greatly attached to all things and phenomena. A sense of impermanence arises naturally within them. Of course, for some it manifests as a sense of frustration or anxiety. But that is not what we call a sense of impermanence. That is a form of pessimism. Our current view of impermanence is actually a very realistic mindset. Because in truth, everything is impermanent from moment to moment. There is nothing that is truly permanent throughout the entire process. Something that now appears to truly exist, after a while, it too becomes impermanent and fades away. So in our lives, including our Larunga Buddhist Academy and many other things indeed in the world, a very great many significant changes have truly taken place. As for these profound changes, sometimes, when we haven't properly learned about the concept of impermanence, we may feel very hard to bear. Whether these changes happen to ourselves or to those around us, it feels difficult. But after learning the view of impermanence, basically, although there is still a sense of sadness, we are still fully able to completely accept it. This particular aspect is also extremely important indeed. These scriptural proofs are all very well known. We are all especially familiar with them, aren't we? Everyone should know this. In the morning you see many people, but by evening you may not see them again. In the evening you will see a variety of people, but by the very next morning you may perhaps not see them again at all. When I was translating this time, compared to the translations in words of my perfect teacher and finding comfort and ease in the nature of mind, it's not exactly the same. So this time, based on its detailed commentary, the precise wording is a little different from the original 7 characters. Although in Tibetan it is the same, in Chinese it is not exactly the same. In the past, sometimes there were 7 characters. This situation also existed. So this time, I translated it in a different style. Previous translators also had this habit. So everyone clearly knows the meaning of this particular phrase. In the early morning hours, you might typically see a great many people, but then something happens, and by the very afternoon they are gone, in the afternoon. Later, this afternoon, you might see certain people, many people, but by tomorrow morning they are completely gone again. This may seem very simple, however. You see them in the morning, but not in the afternoon. You see them in the afternoon, but not the next morning. To ordinary people, it seems like there's nothing hard to understand about this. Indeed, some people might think this way. But here still, for example, as explained in the commentary, the first 2 lines of this particular text mainly refer to the concepts of attachment and clinging. For instance, in the morning, you might see someone you genuinely like, or you observe someone particularly good, but then, by the afternoon, something entirely unexpected suddenly happens. Especially nowadays, for example, a traffic accident, or all kinds of devastating disasters like widespread floods or destructive fires, various calamitous events including wars and so on. Then, the latter 2 lines mainly refer to some merchants. For example, everything is fine this afternoon, but because of business, they have to go out for something, and by tomorrow, suddenly they're gone. They might tragically die somewhere at night, situations as perilous as this. So this case mainly occurred when the Buddha was residing in Shravasti. At that time, it should have been during the reign of King Prasenajit. At this time there was a young man who had a beautiful wife. Their family relationship was extremely good. It seems that this man, her husband, went out. In today's modern terms, he went to work, went to his job. Then when he came back, he found that his wife had been bitten by a black venomous snake. After being bitten, she died on the spot. Perhaps in India, such things can happen very quickly. So when he returned in the afternoon, his relatives and friends were in the solemn process of burning his beloved wife's body, meticulously preparing for the cremation. At that profoundly sorrowful moment, her husband was extremely, extremely heartbroken. He tragically threw himself into the fire. And so, by the late afternoon, his entire family was completely gone. In the early morning, everything had been truly harmonious and wonderfully peaceful. The entire family was together, living in complete harmony. But by the late afternoon, however, a change began to occur. The entire family was gone. So after the Buddha had understood this particular situation, he spoke the following words. Some commentaries mention that there are 4 verses here. Some say it's just this one, but anyway, it is indeed true that someone you may have seen in the early morning could potentially be gone by the late afternoon. Isn't this something that still happens to us often nowadays? For example, when we take a plane or a car, or when we go somewhere, many people from the Kadampa tradition in the past, whenever they did anything, they would think, this is my last time. Even when going to sleep at night, they would place their bowls upside down. They were in the habit of thinking, tomorrow I won't be here. Some people think this is too pessimistic, but in reality, that's just how things are. Even Steve Jobs back in the day. In his life, Steve Jobs, the visionary founder of Apple Inc., should have been near the Himalayas in India in his early years. He also studied Buddhism for a period of time. You all may have read about his history, and also read his biography as well. Although his translators, sometimes he used different terms and expressions. For example, when it comes to his meditation practice, that's precisely how it's described. But he was definitely influenced a lot by the profound principles of Buddhism. In the end, when he was close to death, he also faced it calmly and without suffering. So, generally speaking, when it comes to our own inevitable death, we should have this final kind of profound understanding. For example, if I go out, I might be the very last one, the one who unfortunately doesn't ever come back. We should be prepared for this possibility. Whatever I do, I always maintain an awareness of impermanence. This is extremely important. So here, the main point is also, as it clearly says in the commentary, it's mainly meant to encourage those who are rather lazy in their practice, to motivate them not to procrastinate, because when it comes to spiritual practice, you can't keep putting it off until tomorrow. If you keep delaying like this, you never know when you'll have another chance to practice. You really have to be eager and impatient to practice and accomplish it as soon as possible. You can't afford to delay your practice any longer. If you do, you might never get another opportunity in the future. But when it comes to committing bad deeds or worldly matters, you could say it's perfectly okay to put those things off for a little while, or indeed it's fine to postpone them as well. So in this regard, the main point of this teaching is also very much about this. Next, it then talks about
Jeba vadmit mambo tang tarla wapa gang chivr chinger na tela mando junji de sombi dang chu chiji yodo.
Many men and women, even those in their prime, also pass away. So how can you confidently say, I'm still young, I have plenty of time to truly live and experience life? As we have previously mentioned, the precise timing of death is inherently uncertain and unpredictable. It could be in the morning or it could be at night. It could be in the morning or it could be in the afternoon. Now the main point here is really about our age. Men, women, young and old alike. People of all different ages will eventually and inevitably die. The main point here is about age. In our daily lives, most people would say, oh, you are still quite young, so it is certainly not that easy for you to simply and quickly die. It's as if for young people, when it comes to death, they feel like they've bought some kind of insurance against it. But in reality, that's not the case, regardless of whether you're male or female, because for humans, generally, among men and women, all men and women are clearly included here. So, all of these different people, some, as we have mentioned earlier before, can actually die, even in their mother's womb, and some die in the prime of their lives as well. Here we're talking about humans, not celestial beings. Celestial beings have significantly longer lifespans. Here, the main focus is specifically on the vast masses of people. The concept of the masses refers to this. If we're talking about celestial beings, it seems they're not so easy to die. They have to wait a very long time. But even those in their prime will eventually die. So in that case, can we truly indeed say, I'm still very, very young indeed? Here, there's the particular word, I. It's not very obvious in the original verse itself, but in the detailed commentary, and when the Buddha explained it later, the first-person pronoun is specifically used, referring directly to oneself as I. When you see all the men and all the women in the outside world, including those in their prime, all will die, then what certainty do you have? To say, oh, I definitely won't die, I'm young. I will live here for a very, very long time. What certainty do you have? There is absolutely no certainty at all in life. This is something that everyone should really know well. However, in our busy daily lives, when we look at people in the world, including some businessmen and even some practitioners, it seems that in their words and actions, you can basically tell that they don't really have an understanding of impermanence. For example, someone might be 60 or 70 years old, and even if they live the longest possible life, they may not even live another 20 or 30 years, but in their minds, they are certain that they can live 100 or 200 years old. They have this kind of mindset. But generally speaking, everyone knows nowadays. I saw in a video the other day, it talked about some elderly people who are 145 years old. Now, there may be a very small number of such people. But in general, living to be 100 years old is already an exceptionally rare occurrence. So if you were to make that statement that not dying in your prime, not dying when you're young, this kind of thinking is simply unreasonable. There's no guarantee at all. If you really had some kind of guarantee, then there would be absolutely nothing more to say about it. But when Milarepa truly relied on his teacher Marpa the translator, what exactly did he say? He said something like, if you go do such and such, you won't die for the time being. He only spoke in general terms, not with certainty. This is something you should know. As for this particular story, the main and most important point is precisely where was the Buddha located at that specific time. At that time, the Venerable Ananda once went out from his dwelling. And when he stepped outside, he observed some young people in the vicinity who were singing, dancing, and engaging in various forms of merrymaking. After witnessing this, he felt a profound sense of affirmation. Yes, he thought it was truly wonderful. Then, when he returned from his customary alms round, it tragically seemed that those young people had already died. In the past, because going into the city for alms took only a short time, when he first left them, they were all singing, dancing, full of vibrant life, but by the time he finally came back, they were already completely dead. After returning in shock, he told the Buddha, "Oh, impermanence is truly rare and remarkable. I just saw someone singing and dancing, but when I came back, he had died. Impermanence, how rare and extraordinary it is." But the Buddha said, "This is not really that rare. I have seen something even more remarkable. Once, when I went out for alms, as I was leaving, there was someone singing and dancing. When I came back, he was still singing and dancing. So I found this truly remarkable. To us ordinary people, what the Buddha saw doesn't seem all that rare. It's normal. Someone was dancing when you left, and still dancing when you came back. But what did the Buddha actually mean? He meant that people in this world lack an awareness of impermanence. So when they leave, they're singing and dancing, and when they return, they still don't contemplate impermanence. They're still singing and dancing. So this is even more remarkable. Sometimes the Buddha's wisdom is truly subtle and profound. To us, it might seem like, for example, when we go out, we're also dancing the Vajra dance, and when we come back, they are still dancing, still doing the Vajra dance, even then. But in the eyes of the Buddha, wow, everything is impermanent. After so long, you have interest to dance. Everything is impermanent. How can you be like this? The main point of this verse is, it was spoken based on this kind of dependent origination. That's how it was said. So we often say, on the road to the Yellow Springs, there is no distinction between young and old. This particular kind of saying is quite similar in its essence. So here, among these many individuals, all of them will inevitably meet their demise in this manner, just as described. But nowadays, whether it's the direction of the media or the direction of public opinion, especially in recent times, probably in the past 20 or 30 years, everyone, whether domestic or foreign, thinks that being young is the best. This includes various things people do to their faces. In the media and in any kind of public opinion, they often say, if you take this particular medicine, you won't get old, you'll stay young. Actually, this is a very strange public opinion. Why is that? Our entire lifespan and our physical body must inherently follow the fundamental laws of nature. If you follow the laws of nature, no one can truly stay young forever. No matter what you do, even including the concept of the ancient so-called Taoist elixirs of immortality back in those times, no matter how much you search for it in this world, the image of never aging simply doesn't exist. If you notice even a few wrinkles on your face, or see some signs of aging, it feels especially painful. But actually, there's no need for this at all. Logically speaking, every stage of a person's life has its own unique charm. For example, youth has its own unique and distinctive characteristics. Adulthood has its own characteristics as well. Old age, too, possesses its own truly unique and distinctive qualities. In this particular regard, our Tibetan people in the past, truly, did not feel extremely pained just because they grew old, nor did they feel embarrassed. There was nothing like that. In fact, in some places, people would say, now that I'm old and so on, as if they were proud of having reached a certain age. If they had wrinkles on their face, it was something to be proud of, feeling that they had now become mature, that their life was already quite complete. In terms of their own mindset, there was absolutely no fear, pain, or any sadness at all. But in today's society, it's not like this anymore. It shouldn't be this way. People from all walks of life, as soon as they see signs of aging, they think it's a sign of failure. They feel there is no hope left for themselves. Westerners, in particular, are especially concerned about this. Once they notice, when looking in the mirror, that their face has all sorts of wrinkles all over, they feel especially distressed. There's nothing they can do about it. Who can erase the laws of nature? There's really no need for that. So, as practitioners then, therefore, in this regard, we should strive to be a bit better indeed. But no matter what the circumstances, in this ever-changing world, having a fundamental understanding of the concept of impermanence is very necessary and incredibly beneficial. Sometimes when impermanence really appears, there's nothing we can do about it either. I once saw in a news report, it seemed to be about an American woman who had gotten cancer 4 times in her life. But she was very strong and somehow always managed to get through it each time successfully. Once when she was staying at home, because there are no truly strict gun laws in the United States, virtually everyone can easily play with firearms. At that time, while her next-door neighbor was carelessly playing with a loaded gun, a stray bullet tragically came through the window and instantly killed her. So sometimes impermanence really is quite no matter what, especially rare and quite unpredictable indeed. I once read Master Tangshu's famous work, Recollections of Shadows and Dust, before. In Recollections of Shadows and Dust, there was an incident, but just now I hurriedly tried to find it and couldn't find it, but there should have been one similar story before. There was a person who, while preparing for his wedding ceremony, suddenly died on the way there. We also had a similar case in Sūtra before. Before reaching Sūtra County Town, a close relative of one of our prominent leaders was supposed to get married the very next day. He himself was said to be very happy about it. Everything had already been meticulously prepared in every conceivable aspect. In the afternoon, he had some, wedding invitations, right? Those invitation cards. He was preparing a few to deliver to Huoxi. On his way back home, he suddenly had a very serious car accident. It happened just a little below the technical school there. Isn't there a pile of mani stones by the side? There used to be. It seems that now the mani stones and prayer flags by the roadside have all been cleared away. So it's not clear whether they're still there or not. But at that time, for example, if you were planning to get married tomorrow and then died today or even died on the spot, there were many such sudden deaths. We say, you're in your prime, you're young, so you won't die. I'm young, I truly believe I won't die. If you are young, you also won't die, but that's just what people often say, you know. In reality, there's no guarantee at all. Actually, every single sentence here is truly the language of the Buddha and inherently carries very profound meaning.
Kajik ngardan chivaran yer, devjin kajik zibi sara, devjin kajik Kuksam la devjin kajik yongjig na lala gandang lala jun lala tarla wap ma rimji rapta nrunjirte mjever minbar tonjir jin.
As for what he says next, people of all different ages will eventually die. You absolutely cannot think that for a single moment most of us, or that young people, won't die. In the past, His Holiness Jigme Pansok also once in the Great Assembly Hall mentioned this during a teaching. Now, some people say that among the bodies being transferred for the after-death rituals at Larong, these are all elderly people, so it's nothing to worry about. His Holiness said that when we elderly people hear this, it feels quite heartbreaking, as if the lives of us elderly people are worthless. Young people shouldn't die, otherwise it's such a pity. These are just old people. Look, their hair is all white. If they die, so be it. It's as if, in the whole of society, they've been completely abandoned. You all shouldn't say in the future that it's okay for elderly people to die. Sometimes people say this, half jokingly, half seriously. They've actually quite said this sentence. So in this world, some people die in the womb, some die right after birth, some die while still crawling around, some die while running around freely among the elderly, the young, and those in their prime years of life. People pass away one after another like ripe fruit falling from a tree. Here, among us humans today, the ways people actually die are truly varied and quite unpredictable in nature. Some die in the womb itself, before even coming out of their mother's womb. Perhaps at 2 months, 3 months, or even just 1 month along in the pregnancy, they may tragically die while still in the womb. Some are almost about to be born, or having reached full term and nearing the moment of birth, they are still at risk. As it's explained in the commentary, what we now call a difficult labor, right? They typically die when the fetus is about to be born. Some, after being born, have just started crawling and are still very small and vulnerable. They can't stand up yet, can't walk, and die just as they begin to crawl. Some are able to stand up, but die while running around frantically, chasing after various worldly desires and dreams, dying while still in active pursuit. Some die in old age, some die in their youth, and some die in the prime of their lives. All the people in this world pass away one after another in succession, just like a ripe fruit naturally falling to the ground. The literal meaning here is indeed quite simple and very straightforward and easy to understand. This is mainly what the Buddha, at that time, in Rajagriha, there were 4 brothers. Each of them embarked on their own individual journeys and started their own families. After some time, one of the brothers was blessed with a son. When this young boy grew up, he became quite impressive in his appearance. Later, he made his way to the royal palace and engaged in some truly improper and unacceptable behavior. When the king eventually found out about this, he had the entire families of the 4 brothers brutally killed. In the past, kings could often be quite brutal at times. He had them all executed, and during the entire process, at that time when they were all completely exterminated, some of them were still within their mother's wombs, and tragically, both mother and child were killed. Some were killed immediately, right after birth. Some were crawling infants, but everyone in the family was killed. It was just like the devastating wars currently unfolding in the Middle East or the ongoing Israel-Palestine conflict. At that time, entire families, indeed entire clans, were brutally wiped out. During this incredibly difficult time, among those who tragically died, some were still in the womb, some were crawling infants. Some were running around freely, some were in their prime years of life. There were all kinds of different people everywhere. So there was absolutely no fixed age range at all. At that time, some of them were pregnant women. Some were women who had just given birth. Some were elderly women. And many innocent mothers and their young children were tragically killed one after another. In our modern world, there are also ongoing wars and devastating natural disasters like earthquakes. At such difficult times, both the very young and the very old can unfortunately die. This kind of observable phenomenon is actually quite common. In the commentary I explained to you just yesterday, it extensively talked about the significant differences in ages. For example, before the age of 30, a person can still be appropriately called young, reflecting a period of early adulthood. In Master Jikai's commentary, then from the age of 30 to 50 years old is generally considered to be middle-aged. And after the age of 50, individuals are generally considered to be elderly, Within the context of our commentary, the concepts of young people, those who are middle-aged, and elderly individuals are thoroughly explained and defined in the following manner. But now, according to the World Health Organization, in 2024 it was said that individuals who are between the ages of 18 and 65 are generally considered to be young adults. Furthermore, those individuals who fall within the age range of 65 to 79 years old are typically classified as middle-aged. Those individuals who are between the ages of 80 and 99 years old are officially considered to be elderly. Therefore, everyone who is currently present here, if we strictly adhere to this standard, are all still very much young people, aren't they? We're all young people. Many people, even when they eventually reach their 50s or 60s, still, including several of us Khenpos, even we ourselves have not yet reached the current age of 65 years. I just calculated yesterday, I'm 63. So, I am still considered to be quite young, not yet having reached the stage of being middle-aged. People who are between the ages of 80 and 99 years old are generally considered to be elderly, right? This is their established statistical method for the year 2024. Some of them believe that because in ancient times, including the significant lack of certain essential medical resources, people, especially when they were young and vulnerable, often experienced a considerably higher rate of premature death. Now, with significant advances in modern medicine and technology, things are much, much better. So they also believe that while human lifespan may not significantly increase, it can at the very least be consistently maintained. So that's another important perspective. Some people even say that the World Health Organization, in an effort to comfort others, if you are still young now, a lot of people really like that, even though they may already look old and confused. If you tell them, you look so young. These days, a lot of people like to say things like that. You're getting younger and younger. But actually, that's completely impossible. Getting progressively younger and younger goes directly against the fundamental laws of nature. If you're not aging too badly, then saying that in this particular context is still quite reasonable indeed. But if you're getting younger and younger, that's like time going backwards, which is also completely impossible in reality. So some people might say this just to make others feel happy and cheerful, but in actual reality, no matter what, once the right conditions come together, it's just like a ripe fruit. If it naturally falls, no one can truly control it. This is a vivid analogy used to explain a complex concept. The following lines in this presentation will also be explained using analogies. When I translated this verse, it was a little bit hard to understand, so I referred to some other sources. For example, a ripe fruit inevitably fears falling. It's the same for all living beings. They are always afraid of death's inevitable arrival. Literally speaking, indeed. For example, in the end, people are just like ripe melons falling to the ground. Ultimately, everyone will eventually pass away, one after another. Just like a perfectly ripe fruit, it will naturally fall to the ground, but it still feels a profound sense of fear. I'll talk more about this fear. It is inherently afraid of falling to the ground. A perfectly ripe fruit is naturally afraid of falling to the ground. In the same way, life, all of us human beings are born into this world. And after birth, our lives are just like this too. We are often deeply afraid of death, but being afraid is entirely useless. Death is an inevitable part of life. Death will definitely and indeed come. That's essentially the literal meaning. Our commentaries also more or less explain it in this manner. The idea is that this ripe fruit, it's as if it also feels a kind of fear, something quite similar in nature. It's not truly afraid, though, for example, our common apples and pears we know so well, when autumn comes, they naturally fall from the tree. But it's as if the apple is very much afraid. However, being truly afraid is utterly useless. It will most definitely fall to the ground. The commentary says that these are the words of the naked ascetics. They believe that plants have life, so they think fruits are very afraid because they're about to die. But dying is also useless, because they acknowledge that plants are indeed living beings. Even if you are truly afraid, it is ultimately useless. The ripe fruit will still inevitably fall to the ground. So, as human beings living in this vast and intricate world, life is precisely the same way. That's why, on one particular occasion, the Buddha also led his followers to the verdant forest. He observed that amidst the incredibly lush, vibrantly green trees, abundant fruits were on the verge of falling. At that moment, the Buddha told the monks, "All phenomena are impermanent and unstable." It's exactly the same, and so on. So this particular verse was indeed spoken. There is such an explanation. I also saw another commentary in another quite different commentary. There is a different story used to explain this verse. This concept might be easier to understand. There once was a caretaker of a flourishing orchard, which was essentially a beautiful garden filled with diverse fruit trees. He was called the diligent orchard keeper, the man who watched over and maintained this expansive garden. At that time, many ripe fruits would consistently fall every time. But on one specific occasion, the king gave him an order that these perfectly ripe fruits should not be allowed to fall down. Sometimes these kings can be quite capricious. I don't know why he said that. He explicitly stated that they must not be allowed to fall. The caretaker was utterly speechless at that moment. He thought to himself, considering that if the fruits were indeed to fall, this king, known for his cruel, would undoubtedly take his life. But there was nothing he could do. In the end, all the fruits still fell to the ground one after another. Later, he really had no other choice. He eventually went to Shakyamuni Buddha and became a monk. But after ordaining, because he became a monk out of fear, his motivation was not very pure. As a result, his practice was not very good. He was constantly distracted every single day. Some monastics, it is also stated like this in the Vinaya, if their sorrow and fear have not been cleared, they cannot be accepted as monks. But the Buddha definitely knew this at the time, yet he still allowed him to become a monk. After ordaining, he was not diligent. Later, the Buddha rebuked him, saying he needed to be diligent. Otherwise, when impermanence arrives, and then he began to recite this particular verse. So, from this perspective, because it explicitly states here that even though one might be feeling a profound sense of fear, it will still fall completely away. So it's better to talk about it from the case of a person. Otherwise, as in the earlier statement of the naked ascetic, it could also be truly said that plants do indeed have life, and that would be perfectly acceptable too. Or just as the Master Jikai said, it has a kind of similar fear. Fruits do not actually have any real fear, but no matter how truly afraid you are, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. In fact, it's the same. Nowadays, all of us are very afraid of death, but being afraid is useless. Eventually, you will definitely die. No matter how scared you are, there's nothing you can do. Some people, when they receive, for example, a doctor's final notice from a medical professional that death is approaching, a rather serious kind of notification, they become extremely desperate. But I think many of us, those who have studied the contemplation of impermanence, seem to effectively handle this particular aspect quite well. Basically, there is hardly any sense of fear. I know that I will die. The doctor says I'm about to die. Well, if I die, I find it quite interesting. When I die, I want to pray to my guru. I truly want to do this and that. Indeed, we often see that many people, in fact, after studying impermanence, are doing very well. Whether it is facing their own death, even fruits are afraid of falling down and dying. But after we have studied impermanence, basically we know that our 5 aggregates are just a temporary combination and certainly won't last for a long time. Moreover, if something suddenly happens, for example, suddenly being diagnosed with a very serious late-stage cancer, it seems that people who have generally studied the Dharma, the Buddhist teachings and its tenets, they don't immediately fall into despair in their hearts, nor do they become especially heartbroken right away. If that's the case, and they face it with increasing strength and resilience, there might even be a significant chance for a full recovery. So a person's mindset is also very important. And knowing about this impermanence is also very important. I often think including our lecture today is also truly a manifestation of the impermanence. When I gave lectures last year, I wasn't like this either, and neither were you. Suddenly, just last winter, there were some rather significant and unexpected changes that occurred, completely altering the situation. And it's not just us who have changed, but also everything we see up and down. There is a lot of impermanence as well. So in this world of impermanence, we see far too many cases of impermanence. So for ourselves too, we shouldn't treat it as something that only happens outside of us, whether it's my own mind or my own body. In many aspects, impermanence truly does occur. At such times, we may find ourselves in a world of impermanence, facing the reality of impermanence, and we also have our own ways of dealing with impermanence. All right, that's all for today.
Bandangara Badna Sadarda Bandangara Badna Sada Bandangara Badna Sadarda